A true nightmare. Even skilled detectives admired his techniques. In a quiet neighborhood, life seemed normal for those who crossed paths with Jorge Humberto Martinez Cortez. But behind his charming smile and caring personality lay a disturbing secret, a dark side that changed the lives of everyone who trusted him. This is the story of a man who gained his victims' trust only to betray them in the most horrifying ways. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this as we dive into the chilling details of this unsettling case. From the shocking crimes to the investigations that followed, stay with us as we piece together the truth about the man known as El Mata Novillas, or the Bride Killer. The police patrol car cruised steadily along the dimly lit street, its headlights cutting through the dusk as the officers inside kept a sharp eye on the passersby. A woman hurried by, clutching her purse as she made her way to the nearby store. A group of young men stood casually in the middle of the road, laughing and chatting while waiting for a friend. Among the throng of pedestrians, an unkempt figure stood out, a disheveled man pushing a battered supermarket cart overflowing with dirty clothes and tattered bags stuffed with mysterious contents. The man, clearly homeless, trudged along at a slow pace, his gait uneven with a slight limp. A frayed bag dangled precariously from his shoulder, and his weary eyes reflected a lifetime of hardship and despair. His disheveled appearance caught the attention of the patrol officers, who decided to investigate further. Parking their vehicle at the side of the road, they approached the man with measured caution. "Sir, can you identify yourself?" one of the officers asked firmly. The man shifted uncomfortably, his fingers tightening around the cart's handle. His nervous demeanor grew more pronounced as he stammered out an incoherent response and ultimately refused to provide his name. The officers, now suspicious, decided to bring him in for further questioning. At the station, the routine fingerprint check led to an unexpected discovery, one that left the officers in stunned silence. The vagrant was not merely a homeless wanderer, but Jorge Humberto Martinez Cortez, a 38-year-old Mexican fugitive who had been on Interpol's most wanted list for the past 7 months. Jorge's background revealed a chilling narrative. Born on January 5, 1978, in a modest suburb of Mexico City, Jorge grew up in the shadows of poverty and dysfunction. In a neighborhood where survival often meant surrendering to the streets, Jorge's childhood was marked by pain and neglect. Yet, his beginnings gave little hint of the man he would become. Jorge's early years were spent in a home marred by chaos. Instead of warmth and security, his upbringing was steeped in violence and instability. Frequent arguments, emotional neglect, and episodes of physical abuse were woven into the fabric of his daily life. These experiences left deep scars on his psyche, cultivating a simmering rage that would shape his future. As he grew older, Jorge's temperamental nature and volatility alienated those around him. He struggled to form meaningful connections, leaving him without a support system of friends or colleagues. The emotional wounds inflicted during his childhood festered, eventually manifesting as calculated cruelty and unrelenting anger. The man apprehended by chance on a busy street was more than just a down-and-out drifter. He was a complex individual shaped by a lifetime of trauma, whose troubled past had set him on a dark path, a path that ultimately landed him on Interpol's radar and brought him face to face with justice in the unlikeliest of circumstances. Jorge attempted to carve out a respectable life for himself by dabbling in various jobs, but each endeavor ended disastrously, often culminating in heated arguments or dramatic dismissals. By 2010, his troubled behavior escalated to criminal activity. Jorge was arrested for aggravated robbery, earning him his first criminal record. The court sentenced him to 4 years in prison. However, due to it being his first conviction, he was granted bail and released early. Determined to start fresh, Jorge found employment and made a genuine attempt to turn over a new leaf. It was during this period of tentative stability that he met Adriana Ramos. Their encounter on a breezy evening in a quiet cafe seemed serendipitous. Adriana's radiant smile and magnetic personality, and for the first time in years, Jorge felt hopeful. Adriana's intelligence and charm sparked something in him, and under her influence, he began to view the world through a new lens. He noticed beauty and meaning in the small details of life, things he had previously overlooked. Jorge believed he was changing, growing into a better version of himself. But the honeymoon phase was fleeting, and the budding romance took a dark turn. One fateful evening, Jorge returned home visibly drunk, his mood volatile. What began as an argument quickly escalated into a torrent of verbal abuse. Though he calmed down soon after, similar episodes became increasingly frequent. Adriana, terrified and weary, finally mustered the courage to confront him. She told Jorge she could no longer endure the abuse and wanted to end the relationship. That decision turned out to be perilous. Late one night, Jorge's simmering anger erupted into violence. He attacked Adriana as she slept, punching her repeatedly and breaking her nose. Dragging her down the stairs by her hair, he screamed threats and swore they would never part. Fueled by a toxic blend of rage and despair, Jorge turned on the gas in her apartment. Standing with a lighter in his hand, he vowed they would die together. In a desperate bid to survive, Adriana fought back. Spotting a sledgehammer near the door, a tool left behind from renovations, she swung it with all her strength, striking Jorge and forcing him out of her apartment. Shaken but alive, Adriana immediately filed a police report. Yet, to her disbelief and horror, the authorities dismissed the attack as a mere domestic dispute. They failed to take her claim seriously, leaving Adriana vulnerable and frightened. Fearing for her life, she went into hiding, severing ties with her old life. For years, she lived in constant dread, haunted by the thought that Jorge might track her down and strike again. The encounter with Adriana marked another dark chapter in Jorge's life, a grim testament to the unchecked spiral of violence and rage that had come to define him. For Adriana, it was a harrowing reminder of how easily justice could fail the vulnerable. The young woman managed to escape Jorge's grasp with her life intact. On the evening of September 21st, 2014, Jorge made a frantic call to emergency services. He reported that his girlfriend, Yang Kyung, had hanged herself in their living room. Police and medical responders rushed to the scene where they found Yang Kyung lifeless. The official declaration from emergency doctors was grim. She was dead. What seemed like a tragic suicide to the authorities raised unspoken questions for those who knew Jorge's history. Behind the official report lay an unsettling mystery, one that suggested the shadows of his dark past had resurfaced in a devastating way. Her lifeless body lay crumpled on the floor, a scarf wrapped twice tightly around her neck. Jorge claimed he had returned home after a long night shift at the bar and found Yang Kyung hanging from the ceiling by the scarf. Panicking, he said he tried to pull her down, but she slipped from his grasp and fell to the floor, landing awkwardly between the furniture. The police and forensic experts examined the scene, concluding that it was a case of voluntary suicide. The report closed the case swiftly, but Yang Kyung's family had lingering doubts. When they later reviewed the forensic findings, unsettling details emerged. Her body bore multiple bruises and a conspicuous lock of her hair had been cut. Despite these anomalies, the investigators dismissed the concerns as irrelevant, and the case was buried in bureaucracy. 2 years later, tragedy struck again, eerily reminiscent of the past. Another young woman was found dead in her apartment, and once again, the report came from none other than Jorge Humberto Martinez Cortez. This time, the victim was Campira Camorlinga, a vibrant and cheerful woman with a difficult past. Widowed at a young age, Campira had been raising her 2 children alone. Seeking companionship, she met Jorge through social media. What started as a thrilling virtual connection soon blossomed into a passionate romance. Jorge's enigmatic personality intrigued Campira, and she dived headfirst into their relationship, hoping to rebuild her life. On December 31st, 2016, New Year's Eve, Campira's phone buzzed incessantly with calls and messages from loved ones wishing her well. But the messages went unanswered, and the calls rang on with no response. 3 months later, unwilling to let the case fade into obscurity, Campira's family launched their own investigation. Gabriel returned to the apartment where Campira and Jorge had lived, combing through her belongings in search of clues. Although the laptop they found had been wiped clean, an iPad provided a chilling glimpse into Campira's final hours. Among the photos stored on the device, Campira could be seen posing with Jorge on New Year's Eve. The images depicted a seemingly happy couple celebrating together, their smiles betraying no sign of the horror to come. In one particularly haunting photo, they were lying together on the same couch where Campira's body was later discovered. Her hair was still long and untouched, contradicting the gruesome state in which she was found. Further scrutiny of the photos revealed a disturbing detail. Jorge was drinking from a skull-shaped container. When the family cross-referenced this with evidence collected at the crime scene, they learned that the same skull-shaped object had been discovered in the apartment's freezer. This macabre connection deepened their suspicions about Jorge's involvement and hinted at an unsettling, ritualistic undertone to the crime. Adding to the unease, Jorge had left behind a series of items on Campira's desk after her death. Among these were a sinister drawing of a demon and a pair of boots, items that seemed almost deliberately placed as eerie markers of his presence. To Campira's family, these remnants were more than just possessions. They were clues, pieces of a puzzle that painted a harrowing picture of what had transpired that fateful night. Yet, despite their relentless efforts, justice for Campira remained elusive as the investigation into her death continued to languish in silence. At first glance, recent photos of Campira and Jorge suggested a happy relationship, raising troubling questions. If everything seemed fine, where had Jorge disappeared to, and why? Did he vanish deliberately, or was he fleeing the consequences of a dark truth? Gabriel Camerlinga, Campira's brother, shared chilling details with Mexican television. He described a gruesome scene in her apartment with blood splattered across the room and injuries evident on her face, arms, legs, and chest. Gabriel noted how Campira had been a radiant and strikingly beautiful woman, with her silky long hair being one of her most admired features. Yet, when her body was discovered, her hair had been disturbingly cut and the gas faucet in the apartment had been left open. Convinced that his sister's death was no accident, Gabriel took to social media to share her story. His efforts uncovered a disturbing connection, a case involving another woman who appeared to have been killed under eerily similar circumstances by the same man. Campira's grieving relatives created a Facebook page titled Justice for All to rally support and gather information. Their campaign gained traction, eventually prompting the Attorney General's office in Mexico City to reopen the case. However, by the time authorities took action, Jorge Humberto Martinez Cortez, dubbed El Matanovias, or the Bride Killer by Mexican media, had already fled the country, slipping away before he could be apprehended. As the investigation deepened, chilling details about Jorge's crimes began to surface. It became clear that he was a meticulous manipulator, skilled at tampering with evidence to mislead investigators. He staged crime scenes to make it appear as though his victims had died by their own hands, a ruse that worked in at least one prior case. His ability to remain calm and calculated, even in the face of violence, left even seasoned detectives in awe of his cold-blooded precision. The manhunt for Jorge sent shockwaves through Mexico City, where fear and anger gripped its residents. Social media was flooded with photos and videos of the suspect, fueling public outrage and demanding accountability. Citizens began referring to him by his infamous moniker, El Matanovias, a label that underscored the brutal nature of his crimes. Despite widespread attention, the investigation and the search for Jorge progressed at a frustratingly slow pace. Public pressure mounted as details of Jorge's atrocities continued to dominate headlines. It was revealed that he had not only killed 2 women, but had also attacked a third, leaving a trail of fear and heartbreak in his wake. The calculated and sinister nature of his crimes horrified the nation, prompting calls for justice that reverberated across social and traditional media. As fear of the so-called bride killer grew, citizens demanded swift action from authorities. Despite this, the lack of urgency in the official investigation left many questioning the system's ability to protect its most vulnerable. The hunt for Jorge Humberto Martinez Cortez became a race against time, one that highlighted both the power of collective outrage and the tragic failures of a justice system struggling to keep up with a predator hiding in plain sight. Surveillance footage became a key. Authorities began to suspect that Jorge was not just a domestic abuser, but a methodical and dangerous serial killer. Between 2011 and 2016, he was linked to the murders of 2 women, Yang Kyung and Campira, and the attempted murder of Adriana. His modus operandi involved strangling his victims, abusing them repeatedly, and then manipulating the crime scenes to appear as suicides. The cut strands of hair kept as trophies became his gruesome signature. On social media, Jorge presented himself under aliases like Joy Drago or Joy Agote, crafting a curated persona that masked his violent tendencies. These online profiles showcased a man who appeared confident and charming, but they also hinted at a darker, more sinister personality lurking beneath the surface. The growing evidence and chilling testimonies painted Jorge as a calculated predator. Dubbed El Matanovias by the media, he became a symbol of a justice system that had failed to protect its victims. The cases of Yang Kyung, Campira, and Adriana highlighted not only Jorge's horrifying crimes, but also the systemic gaps that allowed him to evade capture for years. In 2016, Jorge Humberto Martinez Cortez was formally accused of murdering his most recent victim, Campira Camerlinga. As the evidence mounted against him, Jorge fled, prompting Interpol to issue a red notice for his arrest. He disappeared without a trace, abandoning his online presence and drastically altering his appearance once again. To evade capture, he disguised himself as a homeless man, blending into the streets in an attempt to remain unnoticed. His efforts to elude justice came to an end in October 2017, when he was apprehended by Guatemalan authorities in the city of Rio Dulce, a neighborhood in Livingston near Puerto Barrios, Guatemala. Jorge's arrest was a chance encounter by local police during routine patrols. His shabby appearance and life on the streets had allowed him to avoid detection for nearly 7 months, resourcefully evading surveillance cameras and passport controls. After confirming his identity and learning of the international warrant against him, the Guatemalan police swiftly moved to extradite Jorge to Mexico. On October 24, 2017, he was formally handed over to Mexican immigration authorities at the Frontera El Carmen Talisman bilateral border crossing. The transfer occurred at 4:00 p.m. local time, according to Rodolfo Salada, a spokesman for Guatemala's Ministry of the Interior. Before being extradited, Jorge was detained overnight at a migrant shelter in Guatemala City under tight security. The following day, escorted by Guatemalan authorities, he began the journey to the border, where he was handed over to Mexican officials. His capture marked a significant breakthrough in the cases of 2 murdered women, Yang Kyung-jun Borrego and Campira Camerlinga, whose deaths he had allegedly orchestrated and staged to look like accidents caused by gas leaks. According to police investigations, Jorge's modus operandi involved strangling his victims and then altering the crime scenes to mislead investigators. The women's deaths bore disturbing similarities, and he was known for cutting locks of their hair as trophies. These chilling details were key in linking him to the murders. Despite overwhelming evidence and public outcry, Jorge had managed to evade justice for years until his arrest. On October 26, 2017, Jorge was formally charged with murder and other crimes, including bodily injury. While the charges seemed definitive, the trial process proved complex. Jorge's behavior in court drew criticism. He was reprimanded multiple times for his conduct during the proceedings. Although he faced overwhelming accusations, including the murders of 2 women and an attempted murder of another, his sentencing remained elusive. As of his trial, Jorge Humberto Martinez Cortez, known as El Matanovillas, or the Bride Killer, had yet to be sentenced. His case remains a grim reminder of the failures in the justice system and the enduring fight for closure by the families of his victims. The public, still haunted by his crimes, continues to demand accountability for the lives he destroyed. In 2016, Jorge Humberto Martinez Cortez was formally accused of murdering his most recent victim, Campira Camerlinga. As the evidence mounted against him, Jorge fled, prompting Interpol to issue a red notice for his arrest. He disappeared without a trace, abandoning his online presence and drastically altering his appearance once again. To evade capture, he disguised himself as a homeless man, blending into the streets in an attempt to remain unnoticed. His efforts to elude justice came to an end in October 2017 when he was apprehended by Guatemalan authorities in the city of Rio Dulce, a neighborhood in Livingston near Puerto Barrios, Guatemala. Jorge's arrest was a chance encounter by local police during routine patrols. His shabby appearance and life on the streets had allowed him to avoid detection for nearly 7 months, resourcefully evading surveillance cameras and passport controls. After confirming his identity and learning of the international warrant against him, the Guatemalan police swiftly moved to extradite Jorge to Mexico. On October 24, 2017, he was formally handed over to Mexican immigration authorities at the Frontera El Carmen Talisman bilateral border crossing. The transfer occurred at 4:00 p.m. local time, according to Rodolfo Salada, a spokesman for Guatemala's Ministry of the Interior. Before being extradited, Jorge was detained overnight at a migrant shelter in Guatemala City under tight security. The following day, escorted by Guatemalan authorities, he began the journey to the border, where he was handed over to Mexican officials. His capture marked a significant breakthrough in the cases of 2 murdered women, Yang Kyung-jun Borrego and Campira Camerlinga, whose deaths he had allegedly orchestrated and staged to look like accidents caused by gas leaks. According to police investigations, Jorge's modus operandi involved strangling his victims and then altering the crime scenes to mislead investigators. The women's deaths bore disturbing similarities, and he was known for cutting locks of their hair as trophies. These chilling details were key in linking him to the murders. Despite overwhelming evidence and public outcry, Jorge had managed to evade justice for years until his arrest. On October 26, 2017, Jorge was formally charged with murder and other crimes, including bodily injury. While the charges seemed definitive, the trial process proved complex. Jorge's behavior in court drew criticism. He was reprimanded multiple times for his conduct during the proceedings. Although he faced overwhelming accusations, including the murders of 2 women and an attempted murder of another, his sentencing remained elusive. As of his trial, Jorge Humberto Martinez, this grim pattern of behavior highlights the dangers of individuals who wear masks of kindness to mask their dark intentions. Jorge's crimes are a stark reminder of how easily predators can manipulate their way into the lives of unsuspecting victims, turning trust and vulnerability into tools for destruction. Even now, as Jorge's story remains one of the most horrifying accounts of serial violence, the fear lingers that someone like him could strike again. His methods, marked by intelligence and a calculated approach, serve as a chilling blueprint for other predators. The question looms: how many other women might fall victim to such carefully masked cruelty? The ultimate tragedy lies in the continued threat posed by individuals like Jorge Humberto Martinez Cortez, whose acts remind us of the vulnerability of trust when placed in the wrong hands. His legacy as El Mata Novias, the bride killer, is not just a tale of horrific crimes, but a cautionary story about the dangers of deceit and the need to remain vigilant against those who prey on trust and vulnerability. The case of Jorge Humberto Martinez Cortez serves as a chilling reminder of how dangerous manipulation and unchecked violence can be. It shows the importance of recognizing red flags in relationships and understanding the lengths to which some individuals will go to maintain control. What seemed like a normal life on the surface concealed a disturbing pattern of abuse, leaving behind heartbreak and unanswered questions. This case highlights the need for awareness and vigilance in recognizing and addressing abusive behaviors before they escalate into tragedy. Thank you for following this story. If you found it engaging, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more thought-provoking content. Sharing these stories helps raise awareness and ensures that important lessons are not forgotten. Stay safe, stay informed, and join us next time for another gripping tale.